Hi, this is Rick Roller, and welcome tonight to our live exam prep series because we're going to go over some questions that will have really meaningful impact for you. Now, we don't have the exact examination questions, but they do bear a striking resemblance, and it's the concepts that are important because once you've been through the classes and you got all your hours put in, what to really get ready for your real estate license exam, you need to work with questions because if you by working with the questions, that's where the rubber hits the road. You either know it or you don't. You have to commit, and it's surprising how good you can actually get. I know you can do this. I mean, I know we have some people in our school that they're kind of exam phobics and you freeze up. I understand that. I understand that. But you're still going to get this. You're going to get through the test. You're going to get your license and you're going to be able to bless lives and make some money. So let's get started tonight. Tonight, we're going to be talking about some different concepts in regards to transfer and ownership and deeds. And we've got some really good questions. So tonight, our technical expert is Mr. Danny Naylor, who's the owner of our school, and he'll be running the computers for us. So let's get started, Danny. Let's look at number one. Okay, what we've got here is which of the following gives constructive notice? Constructive notice to third parties of a property sale. Now you're going to find as you go through this course that there's words that you just don't use in your normal language. I mean, when's the last time you walked up to someone and started talking about constructive notice? I mean, you just don't. I mean, heck, I don't know. Might get slapped depending on exactly who you're talking to. But the point is here is constructive notice is anyone who had an interest could find out about it. And there's just a lot of verbiage in real estate that you've got to know to get through the test. Now, please understand, it's not a completion exam. You don't have to go in and write an essay or fill in blanks. It is a multiple choice exam. The right answer is on there. It's going to be A, B, C, or D. All right. So in this one, constructive notice. Is it a loan instrument being exercised? Exercised meaning maybe signed or put into effect. Nope, that's not it. Commissions being paid to agents. Well, we like commissions being paid to agents, but I don't think that has anything to do with constructive notice, guys. How about C? Legally recording the deed. Oh, that is warm and fuzzy. You've got to grab that one. Yeah, because it's the right answer. And then D, accepting an offer on the property. Okay. Accepting an offer on a property does not necessarily give constructive notice. Constructive notice, you need to tie that term into the word recording. Something is recorded. When something is recorded, it gives constructive notice because it doesn't mean people are necessarily going to, see it, but those that wanted to see it could have found it. And so that is called constructive notice. If you handed somebody something, that would be actual notice. You know, it's like the sheriff handing someone a eviction notice. Yeah, that's an actual, you know, type delivery. But this one's constructive delivery or constructive notice. If you put it in the public record, that's where you're going to see this. You got to get this. All right, let's go to number two, please. All right.
Hey, hope you're enjoying the video. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any more of them. And if you want even more review material, we have in the Prep My Exam link in the comments, we've got a plethora of practice exams, we have audiobooks, we have an exam simulator, we have everything that our students use to pass the exam on their first try. Okay? And if you want to get licensed in Utah, check out realestateonlinelearning.com and we'll hook you up.
Number two says, unless there is a language in the contract to the contrary, the right of possession or right to possess a property transfers when what happens? Is it the deed is recorded, or the deed is delivered and accepted, or the title insurance is effective, or the day after the closing? Okay, well, language in the contract to the contrary. Okay, so the basic law, despite what the contract says, I mean, if the contract is mute on this issue, would it be when it was recorded or delivered and accepted? Well, here's the thing, folks. You don't have to record anything. You don't have to do it. Now, they're going to make you do it, the bank is, because they want constructive notice given to anyone that they have a lien on that property. Well, that just makes sense to a bank. I mean, they got to secure it against the real estate. Otherwise, they're not going to give you $80,000. Okay. on a loan. But the delivery of a deed and it being accepted is when the title actually transfers. And but you know that's a more of a theoretical type of an idea, but still, the right to possess a property transfers when the deed is delivered and accepted. Now, we handle this in the contract. We have a section in the contract that handles the right of possession. And we have to have that because some people don't move out of the property even though it now belongs to the buyer. They have a day or two or three to get out of the house. Some people need the money from the sale in order to get the trucks and whatnot to get out of the house. So, the best way to structure your deals when you're putting this together from a practical point of view is to talk to the listing agent. You got a buyer that wants to make an offer on a property. This whole idea of possession is something, if you could just call the other agents and say, how quickly can the people get out, or what can we do about possession? They say, well, they need the proceeds from the sale in order to get the equipment and the trucks to get out of there. So we're going to need at least 3 days, maybe a day to load up and a day to finish, and then another day to clean up after that. But it's not the title insurance is effective. That doesn't have anything to do with transferring title or the day after closing. That doesn't have anything to do with it either. We define it in a contract, it's true. But of these four, if the deed is delivered and accepted, it doesn't have to be recorded. You know, I mean, is it stupid not to record? Probably. You ought to record it because that way it's there. It's for sure. I mean, if you didn't record that deed, that document itself becomes really, really, really important. And what if it's lost or burnt up or destroyed or a moth ate it, or I don't know, then you're in really bad shape. Okay. So better that it's delivered and accepted. That's great. That's when the title transfers. But to prove it up, that's why we put it in the public record. Let's go to number 3, please. Wow, a person who conveys ownership of a property to another using a deed is a, what are they? Are they a lessor? What lease? Are they a lessor? No, they're not a lessor. Are they a grantor? Well, hey, hang on to that one. That's warm and fuzzy. How about C, a mortgagee? Some people pay cash. Some people don't even get a loan, or they are an assignee. That's someone that had something under contract and then assigned it or gave it to someone else, or they assigned it to their corporation or to a family limited liability company or a trust or something. They put it under contract in their name and then they put it into an entity name later. And that's an example of assignment. So of these four, what is this person that's conveying a property? Well, the giver is a grantor. Okay, so if you were thinking grantor, hey, you're right on the money. Answer B is the correct answer to number 3. Not a lessor, that's in a lease, not an ownership. Not a mortgagee. People pay cash, believe it or not. And so that way but they still are buying properties, selling properties for cash. And they're not an assignee. Okay? Know your terms. The only way to know your terms is to use these practice questions and read the book and pay attention. So let's look at number 4, please. A deed that warrants the buyer against encumbrances only during the seller's period of ownership is a special warranty deed, executor's deed, general warranty deed, or quit claim deed. Okay. Now, warrants a buyer against encumbrances, covenant against encumbrances. Okay. But only for the time that seller has owned the property. And that is a very favorite deed with banks, because if they foreclose on a property, they're not going to warrant anything except for the little short period of time that they actually had it, and that would be a special warranty deed, okay, which is number A. So a special warranty deed is a deed that only guarantees encumbrances for during the time that the seller owned the property. That might be months, might be years. I don't know. But answer A for number 4. Okay, thank you very much. Now, an executor's deed is if someone dies, and there's a legal process you go through. The general warranty deed warrants all the way back to the original government land patent in a quit claim deed. Um, is usually used to clean up mistakes. I signed a deed one time in a property I own, I sold, I signed it Rick Roller. Well, what's wrong with that? Well, yeah, Rick Roller didn't own the property. It was owned by Richard Roller. So a couple of years later, when they were refinancing, uh, I got a call from a title company. Said, "Could you come in and sign a quit claim deed?" In essence, a correction deed, because we're not sure that Rick Roller is the same person as Richard Roller, and that's a title defect. It's cloud on the title. Most title problems can be handled, relatively easily, and particularly a simple one like that, but only if they could find me, and only if I was still alive and available to sign. So things can get complicated, but a special warranty deed says, the very favorite amongst banks, particularly in our state, or anyone that wants to restrict their liability. And but this is all handled in our Rep C agreement. And generally we use a general warranty deed, which goes all the way back to the original government land patent. But you buy insurance, to give to the seller to take care of this. Number 5, please. Number 5 says which would be a cloud on a title. Is the lease a cloud? A. Or is it a B, an outstanding lien on the property? C, multiple owners. Lots of properties have multiple owners. How about multiple previous owners? Well, lots of properties have been bought and sold for generations. So I don't like those last two very well. I don't, so that gives you a 50-50 chance, guys. I mean, do you think it's A or do you think it's B? Well, if you're leaning towards an outstanding lien on the property, that's really going to put a cloud on the title, and that could be a mechanics lien, it could be a first or second mortgage or something, it could be a tax lien. There's lots of different, but a lien has something to do with money, and there's a lien on the property. So the answer in number 5 is B. An outstanding lien on the property would create a cloud that would have to be cleaned up one way or another. And normally, in the process of closing a home, there is a title company that is working in conjunction and insuring the buyer, and the seller buys a policy that insures it, and the buyer buys a policy. The buyer buys a policy that ensures to his lender that there's good title as well. And then, so everyone's feeling warm and fuzzy about it. But they would clean off this lien. Otherwise, it would be a cloud on the title. Number 6. Okay, number 6, it says, which of the following statements is not applicable to a holographic will? Now, a holographic will is a will done in the handwriting of the person that's making the transfer. Probably the most famous holographic will was you know, a will that was a multimillionaire. At one time, he's one of the richest people in the United States, owned casinos in Vegas and that kind of thing. And he'd change his will all the time. And so, you had to figure out which will was good and which was not. And he'd just write a new one. And so it was kind of an interesting situation there. But anyway, let's look at number 6. Which one is not applicable to a holographic will? It can convey property. Yeah, sure. It can convey property. I mean, that's what a will can definitely do that. It must be in the handwriting of the testator. Okay, that holographic means it was handwritten. It must follow state law. And D, it must be witnessed. Ooh, okay, now of all those, you feel good about conveying property, you feel good about handwriting, it's holographic, and you feel good about state law. So that only leaves a D. It must be signed by a witness. These don't have to be witnessed. They could be. They could even be notarized, but they don't have to be. And there's a word must there. Now, must is okay with state law, but must is not okay on requiring a witness on a holographic will. So the correct answer to number 6 is D. It must be signed by a witness, because that is not. And see how the word not is all in caps, N-O-T, not? That's the way the exam will be. They won't try to slip in a negative thing that changes the direction of a question, 360 degrees. you're off in a different direction. It'll be there. So you were looking for a negative. I suggest you read the stem of the question twice before you even look at the answers. Get a good handle on what they're asking you before you even look at the answers. Because there'll be some that will try to lead you off this way or that way. But if you've got a good handle on what they're looking for, driving for, it can be very, very uh, illuminating on which answer is correct. Number 7, please. Okay, number 7 talks about a property that is abandoned and there's just nobody there and no legal owner can be found. I mean, we can look in the public record. I suggest that if you're working certain areas, um, you cruise through those areas on a regular basis. Because if you see a home that's vacant, just pull over. Go knock on the door. No one will answer. Maybe the windows will be, I mean, don't be snooping around things you shouldn't be snooping around. But on the other hand, if there's nobody there, write down all the address, make sure you have a good description, maybe even take a picture. I like to take a picture of me out in front of the home and, kind of like this, with me in the house behind me. And I'll explain that in a moment. But this home is abandoned. Now, who else could you talk to about this house? Well, you could talk to the neighbors across the street. You can also talk to the neighbors on either side. They may be able to give you a lot of info. Oh, they got divorced, and I heard one went to Florida, another one went to California or something. Well, you can track those people down. You can also check in the public record to see if it's in foreclosure as well. And you'd be surprised. People have bought properties about 8 or 9 or 10 years ago. Do you think they have quite a bit of equity in their property? As long as they haven't pulled it out and bought a car or a truck or something. But if they've just been making their payments, I mean, they only paid like maybe $400,000 for it. Now it's worth 8 or 750. Who knows? It's a lot of equity. But some people don't really understand. So whenever you see vacant properties, that's a really good thing to follow up on. My whole career got a jump start because of a vacant property. It was a vacant duplex. And I'll tell you the story sometime. But right now, um, how could the local government take ownership? Because if somebody dies and no heirs can be found, ownerless property really doesn't, you know, benefit anyone. So there are laws in states, and we call these laws escheat, which is B. Okay, that is the correct answer here. It's not assessment. That's something that the tax department does. The county assessor. It's not condemnation. That's a property with that. It could be something that was condemned because of it was unsafe, or there's other types of condemnations we'll get into a little bit later. And on C, eminent domain is the right of the government to take your property, but they have to compensate you for it. Escheat is a situation where no heirs can be found, so there's no one to take it from them. But ownerless property doesn't benefit anyone. But in our state, to tell you the truth, we don't see a lot of this because escheat in our state takes about 5 years, a little, in that neighborhood. But unfortunately, if the property taxes aren't being paid, it's going to be sold at a property tax sale in May of the 4th year, so, or just right after the 4th year. So it's going to be sold at a tax sale before the state can get it because they can't get it for 5 years. But I don't know. Stranger things have happened. Maybe the county just didn't get around to it, but I doubt that very, very much. But escheat is where the government takes it because they can't find an owner for it, because ownerless property doesn't really benefit anyone. But we don't see it a lot because it'll go for a tax sale probably before it gets there. Okay. So what's on the test? Well, the definition of the word is cheat. you know, so really the test is a lot of definitional things. But the problem is you haven't heard these terms before. Let's look at number 8, please. Okay, title insurance. It protects people. I mean, you have car insurance, right? Does that mean you're never going to have an accident? No. But if you do have an accident, there's going to be, some large insurance company that has been accepting premiums, and they're going to try to make everyone whole. Fix the other car, fix your car, whatever. If you ran into something, property damage, they're going to try to fix that too. But title insurance Protects against what? Does it protect against foreclosure? No. The only thing you're going to get protected against foreclosure is making your payments. Foreclosure is when the bank says, wait a minute, you owe us money and you're not paying, so we're going to have to foreclose. And these are people that really need help, and you can find these people quite easily. You can have your title company help you, and you can find them in the public record, because one of the first steps the bank has to do is put a notice of default against the property. So that's someone that hasn't been making their payments. And normally the bank will go quite a period of time before they put that notice of default out there. But once that notice of default is in place, then there's a little waiting period, of several months. And that's a time when you can sweep in and give people some help who really need help. You know, hey, you want to bless lives, make money? Well, bless someone. I mean, go out there and they don't know what to do. And one person tells them to do this, another tells them to do that. And the title company doesn't protect against foreclosure. Does it protect against a subordination clause? Well, there are a lot of definitions in this. And, subordination clause is a clause in a loan that it was normally first to record is first in right, right? So how do we know this lien is ahead of this lien? Well, because this lien recorded first in this timeline, it recorded here. This one recorded over here. So this one is first, this one's second, okay? Just based on calendar days. But a subordination clause says that, well, wait a minute, this loan that was recorded here could become subordinate to this loan here. Anyway, it can change the priority of the loans if the loan in front of you had a subordination clause and the other things were met. Predatory lending, well, it won't protect you against that. I mean, predatory lending is when a lender's just gouging you. That's a whole different set of laws. And usually the only way that works is if your state has a usury limit on the interest that you can charge. Some states have that. You can't charge interest more than this. Utah does not have a usury rate, so it's predatory lending can take on bigger roles than just the interest rate charge, but particularly in the amount of fees that are charged. But that's not what we're looking for. What title insurance does is D. It ensures that the title is in good shape. There are no defects. And if a defect comes up, just like you had an automobile wreck, your auto insurance doesn't stop that from happening. But now it's the same thing in real estate. If a defect is determined or found later after the transfer takes place, title company will come in and defend that title. And, they'll go to court, they'll do whatever's necessary to make sure that seller and lenders are not disadvantaged because of a title defect. So the answer in number 8, folks, is D. Defects in title is what a title insurance is for. They have people that research this. They really dig into it. It's what they do for a living. They're used to digging into public records, and they have little charts they use where, okay, here's a loan, it was put in here, and then later they found out, oh, here's a deed of reconveyance where that loan was paid off, so they kind of line that one out, and they do a really thorough search. And they're very skilled at this. You have to be trained for this. Number 9. I mean, when you get medical insurance, they want to stick you with lots of needles and stuff and do blood draws and see if you're going to die on them, or they want to know you're okay. Title insurance is paid over 30 years, A, all at once, B, C, in arrears, meaning you pay it at, like rent's paid in arrears. No, rent's paid up front. What, are you going to let your tenant live there all month and drop by and say, well, I hope you liked it. Can I have the rent now? I know you want the rent up front. What is paid in arrears? Your house payment's paid in arrears. You're paying the interest on that house payment for the month that was. So that's in arrears. So that's not what we're talking about here. And it's paid by the lender? No. The lender's going to charge the borrower. And also in a closing, we're going to charge the seller, to give a policy to the buyer. So he's warm and fuzzy that the property is really his or hers or theirs, but the lender wants to make sure that it's okay too. But title insurance is paid a B up front all at once. No monthly payments. You pay once and you pay it all up front. And every year, the title insurance companies have to uh, send in their fee schedules to the insurance department, and they look it over, and that's in the public record. But if you wanted to dig into this, you'd find that you know, the rates are all pretty close. They're pretty much the same. It is a very competitive business, but it's also a pretty lucrative business too, because if they've really checked that title out, there's just a few things that could happen that might cause a claim, but it doesn't happen very often. Okay, so, but and it's profitable. It's a very profitable business. But they're insuring large amounts of money too, but it's paid all up front. Let's look at number 10. Now, number 10 is a fun one because it says Jay signs a lease. Okay, so we're talking about leasehold estate. We're talking about a tenant for a building and sets up his business. Oh, great! It's a commercial type thing. The lease is for 24 months, kind of a short lease, okay. But 7 months in, the owner of the building dies. The owner of the building dies. Now, we have a tenant who's living in the building, and the landlord passes away. Okay, all right. What happens to Jay's lease for the building? I mean, the landlord died. Well, let's look at some of the potentials here. A, the lease is automatically expired, and the business must move out immediately. Well, wait a minute. When they moved into this building, they're pretty short-term lease, 24 months, but they still did, they altered the building for their use and whatnot. They printed up stationery and cards and all other kinds of things. They had their phones put in. It's expensive to move, and um, so it's not automatically expired. Look at B. The lease remains in effect. Now, hang on to that one. That one's warm and fuzzy. Look at C. The lease goes up for auction with the proceeds going to the new owner or inheritor. Okay. A lease going up for auction. Maybe the property might end up for auction someday, but not until the tenant's done with it. Tenant has rights. Just because the landlord died doesn't necessarily cancel those rights. And D, a lease will end. Will end at the end of 12 more months. Guys, what do you think? If you like B, boy, I like that one, right? So if that's where you're heading, your instincts are right on the money. If they're not, ingrain this one in your mind, because these leases, they give a tenant rights. Now, they don't give them full plate of all the rights. They have the right of possession, a little bit of use and control, but they can't rent this was a business. They can't rent a business and say, well, I'm a printing operation, and then you go by and they're making drugs. They can't do something illegal in there, and they also can't do things that aren't allowed in the lease as well. So that's why they're thick. And what happens in commercial leasing is usually your larger tenants have a lease that they like, that their lawyers have put together, and if you're representing the buyer, you make an offer, a commitment to lease. They sign that, and then you start negotiating. And the tenant says, well, here's my standard lease. And the landlord said, oh, great, here's my standard lease. And the lawyers get together and make a new standard. And that's kind of cool. There's no lender involved. There's no underwriting as far as that goes. And these things can close relatively quickly. In a couple of weeks, it could be a done deal. I like leasing. It's fun. I do a lot of it. Let's look at number 11. Q decides to rent a single family home. Cool. We like Qs. They're called tenants. The agreement prohibits the tenant from assigning or subletting. Not uncommon. Okay, we want to control our building. Even though you're moving into it, you don't get complete reign to do whatever you want there. Which right in the bundle of rights does the tenant not share in? Is it disposition? Is it quiet enjoyment? Is it use of control or possession? Now, a tenant wanted possession, commercial, or this one, it's a single family home, but they wanted possession. They wanted use and control to a certain extent. They can't do methamphetamine labs and in there. They wanted quiet enjoyment. They, didn't want you coming over every day to see if they're are okay or the property's still okay. Obviously, what they will not share in is disposition. The right to sell or sublet that lease. And because it said they could, it prohibited assignment or subletting. So, guys, it's disposition, the right to dispose of or to transfer or to give to someone else. So cool. And that's a very common thing, especially in a single family. You don't wanting them subletting. You just anybody. You want to make sure the people moving into your house aren't going to tear it up and that kind of thing. Okay. Number 12. Number 12 says a lease that automatically renews at the end of each period is called. Is it tenancy at sufferance? Tenancy at sufferance. Someone's suffering here. Usually it's a landlord because rent hasn't been paid. No, that's not it. Tenancy at will. That's like staying in a hotel. You go down, to somewhere in Arizona. You check in. They say, "Well, how long will you be with us, sir or ma'am?" And they say, "Well, we'll be here a week." Okay, great. But you get a call that night, and you got to get home. Some emergencies come up or something. Someone's sick, or you need to get home. So you go down, you check out the next morning. Oh, we thought you were staying for the week. And well, I have to get home. Well, that's tenancy at will. You can cancel it, and they can cancel you too. You might get a call and say, "Well, Mr. Roller, I'm sorry, but we're vacating that whole floor. The vice president's coming to town, and the Secret Service wants that whole floor. So we're going to move you to a different place, or we're going to move you completely to a whole different hotel, or sorry, you just have to leave." Whatever extent that they consider good service, but something that renews automatically, that was tenancy at will. That's like a hotel or a motel. Periodic tenancy, ooh, that sounds really good. Tenancy by entireties. No, guys, it's periodic tenancy. Okay, because that goes usually we think month to month. It just renews automatically on a month to month basis. Okay. All right, let's look at number 13, please. Definitions, definitions, definitions. All right, what would a non-disturbance clause in a lease protect a tenant from? Loud customers in a parking lot? Yeah, probably throw that one away. How about losing the lease due to foreclosure on a property? Non-disturbance clause. Well, that one sounds pretty good. C, solicitors approaching tenant or their employees. Yeah, yeah. We promise you, no one will ever knock on your door trying to sell you something. Landlord inspection of the property. No, you're going to want to have the right to come in and make inspections with reasonable notice and a reasonable time. So obviously, what a non-disturbance clause is actually B, which says that if the bank forecloses, they can't. The tenant still has rights there. Particularly on commercial properties, because they may have made super alterations to a building. I mean, they may put in a kitchen, built a restaurant in there, decorated up to the nines, and and then what? The landlord dies, and they want you out of the building now? No, 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 no. You've got several years that you need to recoup the tenant improvements you put in this property. Your lease is not going to be canceled. Your business is not going to be interrupted just because your landlord uh, moved on to a new dimension. So the correct answer to this one is losing the lease due to foreclosure on the property. Okay. Someone it's if there's a real problem with your landlord and they're not making the payments and the bank forecloses, then that means you have a new landlord. It's the bank. but you still could be there, and your terms of your rental agreement won't change either. I mean, they can't come back and say, "Well, we want to rate the rent." Like the last guy, couldn't make it. Can't do that. Number 14, please. Hope you're having fun. This is what you're going to be faced with, and you got a lot of questions to go through, and it's a time test. But there's plenty of time, but you got to keep moving, 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 moving. Okay, in order to make it work. Okay. Yeah, feel free to, if you have any questions, I mean, chime up, just text them in the chat and we're fine. That was Danny Naylor reminding me to tell you that. So please do. Okay, S was 3 years into a 5-year lease and wanted to move elsewhere. T was willing to sublet the property. What is true? Well, we're going to have to read that lease, right? Because we don't know if S has the right to sublet or not. We'd have to look. But look at number 14, A. T's pay, but let's assume that this has happened. But T pays rent directly to the owner. Okay, that's the owner of the property. Not S, the tenant that's subletting. Okay. No, no, T doesn't have a responsibility to the owner, assuming that this was put together. T's responsibility is to S. S has no further liability for rents or damage. No, just because S sublet part or all of the property doesn't mean that they're off the hook what they agreed to pay to the original landlord. S has no release of liability here. C, S could increase the rent to make a profit. Well, I don't know, guys. Who has the right to be there? Well, is it the landlord or is it tenant? Well, S could increase the rent. Now, who is S? S is the tenant, right? He's not the landlord, not the owner, and he's got it rented. He's been there 3 years, and so maybe he was a real great negotiator, and the lease is a bargain now, because rents have gone up during the last 3 years. So he wants to sublet. So why would he sublet for less than what the current market is? He might even make some money on this deal. Okay. In fact, I had one investor friend of mine that kind of went around and he specialized in buildings that were abandoned. There wasn't anyone there, and he was looking for buildings where they had a for rent sign. It was hanging by one piece of tape. In other words, the landlord's not paying much attention. Weeds growing out in front. And he would go and negotiate a really cool master lease with the right to sublet, go and clean up the property, and then rent it for more than what he was paying for. Now, this required a lot of really good, sharp, contemporary knowledge on what rents are being paid for what types of property, because cleaning that property up and making it nice, and you probably have a much better chance of getting a tenant in there, and particularly if there is an opportunity to mark that up, you could be controlling a pretty valuable asset without really putting a lot of money in it, except for cleaning it up and your uh, original contributions to lease the property from the original owner, and then you sublet someone else. Okay. So the answer to number 14, guys, is going to be C. Yes, you could increase the rent and make a profit. T is the only one who could be liable for damage to the property. No, and that's the new tenant, but yet S is still going to be on the hook. Okay. Okay. Cool. And there's years ago, there's a property in Denver called Cinderella City, and it had a huge basement in it. And one time, this investor, entrepreneur guy was being shown around the mall and whatnot. And he says, "Well, what's that go to?" "Well, that goes to the basement." So he went down there, and here's this basement. My gosh, it's phenomenal. And so he went back to the mall owners and said, "I want to rent the basement." They said, "What are you going to do with it?" It's a big, huge empty space. Well, he had some escalators put in, and he developed something called Cinderella City or Cinderella Alley. The mall was called Cinderella City. So he did Cinder Alley. And Cinder Alley had little tiny booths, and so people that never thought that they could ever be in a mall and have all that mall traffic, people walking by, had these little shopettes, and so he leased out those little shopettes. So that was lease and release or master lease and sublet. Okay. And he made a tremendous profit. In fact, it was so profitable that the mall came back and said, we really like what you've done. We want to buy it from you. We want to buy back the lease that we gave you. And then a lot of malls started doing it. It was a great, great idea. Let's look at number 15, please. So many ways to make money in this business. Just bless lives and make money. 15, a tenant obtains a lease with a low base rent. Okay, but the catch is he must also pay insurance, property taxes, and other building expenses. What kind of lease is this where the tenant has to pay all those expenses? Is it a percentage lease? A percentage lease is where the tenant, probably a retail type operation or maybe food, I don't know, but they pay a percentage of their gross profits. McDonald's is the largest real estate company in the world, and they make about 20%, from all their franchisees, of what their take is, what their gross sales are. And that's a percentage lease. Okay, is it a gross lease? 15. 15. Is number 15 a gross lease? B, no. Is it C, a net lease? Now, a net lease is the money that's paid to the landlord is net. Who pays all the expenses? Well, in the explanation of this question, it says the tenant's going to pay all those expenses. That's called a gross lease. So the money the landlord gets, if the landlord were paying expenses, it would be gross. The money he got was gross and he had to pay expenses and he gets to keep what's left over. A net lease is where the tenant pays all the expenses and the landlord gets to keep, the majority of that check. He may have a loan on it, but the expenses to run the property are paid by the tenant. Very common in warehousing, you know, not so much in single family retail or fourplexes or duplexes, but very common in industrial type properties or commercial properties. Number 16, ground lease. Okay, a ground lease can apply to vacant land only, residential property only, commercial property only, both residential and commercial property. Okay, so, you know, these exclusive answers that say, oh, only this, only that, only this, more often than not, I'd go for the more inclusive answer, which is D here, both residential and commercial. And you can have ground leases for residential. You can have ground leases for commercial. Probably a good example of a ground lease for either one of these. Well, for residential, it might be a condominium type building where they rented the ground. And of course, the commercial property, well, that'd be probably the best example would be like McDonald's, like I just said, because they're going to ground lease that property back to the franchisee who's responsible for the building and everything else they've got going. Sometimes those are set up in A/B type partnerships too, where someone who wants income and doesn't need the depreciation allowance that owning approved property gives you. One of the big benefits is you can depreciate that property over a period of time and save you money on your income taxes. But if you are a wealthy individual and you're not concerned about you're not concerned about sheltering your money, you're more concerned about building income streams, then owning lots of land leases is a great way to do it, because you're going to get, you're not going to get the depreciation, but you didn't care about that. You just wanted the income off the land. Okay. So restaurants, commercial type buildings, but it could be residential as well, particularly in condominiums and that type of thing. There was some property that I was working with a religious group, and they owned quite a bit of property out by the new federal spy center that was built, just I think that's in Utah County. But anyway, and they wanted water rights and they wanted some other property that this organization owned. And I said, well, let's not sell them the water rights and let's not sell them the land. Let's just lease it to them and create a perpetual income forever and ever and ever. I mean, you're not going to put all the computers and all. This is only the second, second to Fort Meade was the first spy center. This is only the second one, and lots of millions of dollars went into that place. Well, so it could be both residential or commercial. A ground lease could be. But anyway, this particular organization didn't want to do that. So they sold them the land, they sold them the water rights. So they got some money up front. That's great, but they didn't build a perpetual income, which would have lasted for generations. Oh well, you can't talk anyone to making the right decision. They need the right to make the right decision for them, and they didn't want to do it. So they didn't do it. That's fine. Number 17. An owner of a fourplex plans to lease the individual units. It's a good thing to do. Fourplexes are great. They actually, make decent money. I mean, Duplexes are okay, especially if you're living in one half. But a triplex is a little better, but they really start to make sense when it's a fourplex. Okay, and you can still get residential type loans on fourplexes. Fannie and Freddie will lend on a fourplex, particularly if you want to live in one of the units. Is great. So you'll probably live for free. But anyway, number 17 says, but he wants control over who's going to live there. What options can they do? Well, they could they limit only one person per room? Mm. B, limit the total occupants to a reasonable number. C, allow no children. Well, we have laws against that. Uh, but there are some types of properties that are 55 and over that designated that could be an exception to that law, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're just talking about a normal fourplex. D, rent only to a natural born citizens. Okay. Okay. Probably not going to see that happen too often either. I mean, so the correct answer, number 17, guys, it's you can limit the occupants to a reasonable number, and the number you could probably use for that to back you up is every health department. Usually, county health departments have what they call a occupancy limit, and in Salt Lake County, it's 2 people per bedroom, and most of the counties in Utah are the same. So if you have a 3-bedroom home, you could probably say 6 people maybe, but you can limit the number of occupants to a reasonable number, but you better back that up. And it may not work in all cases. I mean, some cultures have sleeping mats and they roll them up, and so they consider the living room an additional bedroom. They roll them out, and then in the morning they roll them back up, put them away, and it becomes the living room again, or the family room, or whatever. Careful about saying no children unless it's in a special designated type property, seniors only um, type thing. But it didn't say that in the stem of the question, guys. So you can't make an assumption that was it. Well, that's our 17 questions for tonight. Now we have a number of these uh, programs on our website, and would love you to come back to the school and watch these reviews, particularly if you're cramming for the exam, because it can be very, very helpful. Okay, now just a word of wisdom here from Forbes. It said that it may be all right to be content with what you have, but never with who you are. And when I got into business, I wasn't content with what I had, and I wasn't content with who I was. So I had a double motivation to make this business work. But it's okay to be content with what you have, but you also want to be contributing as well. Remember, the motto is bless lives, make money. You're going to bless a lot of lives, and you're going to make a great living. So thanks for being with us tonight. Look at more of our live exam prep series because they're a great way to prepare for the exam. I'm Rick Roller. If I can ever be any help to you, you're welcome to call me. 801-556-8000. That's 801-556-8000. Appreciate you being with us tonight. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. If you want to show some appreciation to our instructors, be sure to like and subscribe so that they see how much you enjoyed it. And if you want any additional review material, check the links below for our full suite of practice materials for the real estate license exam. Thank you.